I'm the one who told her, that's the confession. Whatever else I say in all the words that follow, that's the spine of it, the thing I've never admitted to a living soul. I broke my word to a queen, the most direct order I was ever given, and I told the young princess what had really happened while she was lying half dead in that hospital bed for 9 weeks. I told her. Nobody ever found out it was me. They wondered. There was an inquiry of a quiet kind into how she came to know, and I stood in front of it and I lied. The way I'd been trained my whole life not to and had somehow gotten very good at, and they never knew. So if you want a villain in this, a man who couldn't keep a confidence, who betrayed the trust of the person he was sworn to serve, here I am. That's me. I did it on purpose. And I'd do it again, and that's the part I can't make peace with, the I'd do it again. Because a man who'd do a wrong thing again hasn't really repented of it, has he? He's just confessed to it, and those aren't the same. And I'm old enough now to know they aren't the same and to do it anyway. Let me start further back. You won't understand the telling unless you understand the two women and how they were with each other, the years of it, the cold of it. The young princess was Elira. Married to the heir, beloved by the whole country in that effortless way some people are, the kind of person a kingdom decides to love almost as a reflex. And she earned it too. That's the thing, she wasn't just a pretty face in the right gowns. She worked. She remembered people. She had a warmth that came up off her like heat off a stone in the sun. Everyone adored her. I adored her, in the proper way a guard is allowed to. Which is to say, I'd have stepped in front of anything for her and never said a word about it. And then there was the queen, Adeline, the king's second wife. And you know this woman, even if you've never met her, because every court has one and every age has one. The one who came after, the one nobody chose, the practical match made for reasons of state after the beloved first wife was gone, the cold one, the stiff one, the one the public never warmed to and the family tolerated, and the press sharpened their knives on whenever the news was thin. Adeline. She held herself like a closed door. She had a face that gave you nothing and a voice that gave you less. And in 20 years at that court, I never once saw her cry, never saw her laugh with her whole self, never saw the armor so much as slip. And between these two women, the warm one everybody loved and the cold one nobody did, there was a frost that had lasted years. I never knew exactly how it started. These things are like that. The original wound gets lost and only the scar tissue remains. But the shape of it, as everyone understood it, was this. The queen disliked the young princess. Resented her, maybe. Resented the easy love the country gave Elira that had never once been given to Adeline, no matter how hard she worked, no matter how straight she stood. People said the queen was jealous. People said she was cold to the girl in private, that she froze her out, that there'd been slights, snubs, 100 small cruelties of the kind that powerful women inflict on each other in rooms with no witnesses. And Elira believed it. That's the important part. Elira believed the queen disliked her. You could see it in how careful she was around Adeline, the way you're careful around a dog that's bitten before. She'd brace. She'd go a little stiff, a little formal, this warm, open woman closing herself down to a fraction of her size whenever the queen was near, because she'd learned, or thought she'd learned, that warmth shown to Adeline came back to you frozen. So that was the world. Two women, one frost, years deep. I watched it for a long time and I believed the story everyone believed, the simple one, the cold queen and the warm princess and the natural enmity between them. I believed it right up until the 9 weeks. And then I learned, the way you only ever learn these things, by accident in the dark, by being the furniture in the room where the truth finally happened. Elira fell ill in the autumn. I won't go into the particulars of it, partly because they were kept close and partly because they're hers and not mine to hand around, but it was grave. It was the kind of grave where the doctors stop telling you it'll be fine and start telling you very little at all, which is its own kind of telling. She was taken to the Royal Infirmary, a private wing of it, and she stayed there 9 weeks, and for a good stretch in the middle of those weeks nobody was sure she'd leave it walking. There were nights, I was on the detail, I was there, There were nights it could have gone either way. The machines and the hush and the doctor's soft, urgent feet, and the whole country praying outside the walls without knowing how close it actually was. Because the family managed the news the way the family managed everything. Smoothed it, calmed it, gave out the version that wouldn't frighten anyone. The heir came, of course. Her husband. He came when he could, but he had the kingdom on him, the duties, the appearances, the necessary performance of a man whose wife is ill but whose realm doesn't stop. And there were stretches, long stretches, where he couldn't be there, where duty had him somewhere else being seen to be strong. That's not a criticism of him. That's just the shape of that life, the cruelty of it, that even the dying don't get all of you, the crown takes its cut even of your grief. So there were long hours, the deep hours, the 2 and 3 and 4 in the morning hours, when the princess lay in that bed unconscious and unguarded by anyone who loved her, just the doctors and the machines and a guardsman on the door. Me, often. I drew a lot of the night watches. The young men don't like the night watches, and I was old and didn't sleep well anyway, so I took them. And that's why I was there. That's the whole accident of it. That's why I'm the one who knows. Because every night in those deep hours, the queen came. I want to tell it the way it happened, slow, because that's how it landed on me, slow, over many nights, the truth assembling itself piece by piece until I could not see it. The first night I thought it was a one-time thing. Late past 3, the corridor empty and lit that terrible flat hospital way that isn't day or night, just a permanent gray noon that wears you down, and I heard footsteps, and it was the queen. Alone. No lady, no detail, which was almost unheard of. A queen does not move alone ever, and yet there she was in a plain dark coat with the collar up like she didn't want to be known, walking up that corridor toward the princess's room. I straightened. I didn't know what to do. There's no protocol for the queen arriving alone at 3 in the morning. She just looked at me, that closed door look, and she said one thing very low. She said no one was to know she'd come, and she went in. And she stayed 2 hours. I stood on the door and I heard not words, not really. The door was heavy, but I heard the shape of a voice in there, low, going on, the cadence of someone talking quietly to someone who can't answer. 2 hours. And then she came out, and her face was exactly as closed as when she went in, not a hair of it different, and she walked back down the corridor alone and was gone before the shift changed, and the day people came who might have seen her. I thought it was once, grief maybe, a duty discharged. I thought the cold queen has done the correct thing, come once in the night to sit with her dying daughter-in-law, and now she's done it, and that's that. She came the next night, and the next, and the one after. Every night for 9 weeks. Every single night in those deep unwatched hours, the queen of the realm put on a plain dark coat and slipped out of the palace without her detail, which I later understood she'd had to arrange with a care and a risk I can't fully describe. A queen evading her own security nightly is not a small thing. It's the kind of thing that if it had come out would have caused its own scandal. And she came to that gray corridor, and she sat with a Lyra in the dark, 2, 3 hours at a stretch, and she talked to her. To a woman who couldn't hear her. Who, as far as anyone knew, would never know she'd been there at all. I started, after the first weeks, to be able to hear pieces. Not eavesdropping exactly. You can't help what comes through a door over 2 hours when you're standing 6 feet from it night after night, your ears reaching for anything in all that hush. And what I heard undid everything I thought I knew about the cold queen, undid it completely, took the whole story I'd believed for years and turned it inside out. She wasn't being correct in there. She wasn't discharging a duty. She was, I don't know the word. She was with her. She talked to a Lyra the way you talk to someone you love who's slipping away, the way you talk when you think no one will ever hear, and so you can finally say the true things. I heard her apologize, more than once. I heard the cold queen, who I'd never seen so much as soften, apologize through a hospital door to an unconscious woman, for I couldn't get all of it, but the shape of it was years. The shape of it was, I'm sorry for the way it's been between us. I'm sorry I let you believe. I'm sorry I never. I heard her say things a person only says when they're terrified they're running out of time to say them. And one night, one bad night, the worst night, the night the machines did a thing they shouldn't and the doctors came fast, and I thought we were losing her. That night, when it had steadied again, just barely into the small hours, I heard the Queen in there crying. Adeline crying, the woman I'd watched for 20 years and never seen crack. Crying alone in the dark, holding the hand of a woman everyone believed she hated, begging her. I couldn't hear it all, but I heard enough. I heard the word please over and over, please, please, begging her not to go. And I stood on that door with my own face wet. I'll admit it. An old guardsman standing in a gray corridor at 4 in the morning crying quietly because of what I was hearing through a door. Because the whole world had a story about these two women and the whole world was wrong. The whole world had it exactly backwards, and I was the only person alive who knew. She made me swear, of course. She knew I heard things. You can't stand on a door for 9 weeks and not hear, and she was no fool. So near the end, when Alira had finally slowly begun to climb back up toward the living, the Queen stopped me in the corridor one dawn and she looked at me with that closed face and she made me swear that I would never speak of it. Not to the princess. Not to anyone. Ever. That as far as the world would ever know, the Queen had visited once formally in daylight the way protocol required and nothing more. I asked her why. I shouldn't have, you don't question a queen, but it came out of me. I couldn't help it, the why, because it made no sense, because here was the thing that could finally thaw the frost of years. Here was proof that she loved the girl, and she was ordering it buried. Why? And she gave me an answer I've turned over for 30 years and only half understand, even now. She said, and this is close to her words, as close as I can get, she said that love which announces itself isn't love. It's a transaction. It's look what I did, now owe me. She said if Alira knew, then every kindness between them ever after would be weighed against this debt, and she'd not have the girl loving her out of obligation, out of guilt, out of having been shown a receipt. She said the only love worth anything is the kind that asks nothing back, that doesn't even let itself be known, and that she'd rather be thought cold for the rest of her life by a girl who was alive to think it than be thanked ever for any of this. And then, this is the part, she said that the coldness had its uses anyway. That in that court against her, softness was a weakness her enemies would use, and that the only safe place for what she felt was somewhere no one could ever see it, not even the person she felt it for. She'd hidden her own heart so long and so well it had become the only way she knew to keep it safe. From everyone, including from the people in it. So I swore. What else could I do? I swore and I meant it and I kept it for a while. Alira recovered. She came home. The country rejoiced, the bells, the relief, the whole thing, and the frost came back. That's what I couldn't bear. That's what finally broke me. Because Alira came back to the palace believing exactly what she'd always believed, worse, actually, because in her version, while she'd been lying at death's door for 9 weeks, the cold Queen hadn't even come. Hadn't visited but the once, the formal daylight once. And to a woman who'd nearly died, that once landed as the final proof of everything. Even then, even dying, she couldn't be bothered to care. I watched Alira come home, and I watched the careful stiffness go back up around the Queen, harder now, with a new hurt underneath it, the specific hurt of someone who thinks they were abandoned at their lowest. And the Queen let her think it. The Queen stood there and took it, took the girl's cold, careful distance, the polite freeze, knowing exactly what was underneath it and exactly how to dissolve it with a single sentence and choosing, every day not to. Because of her terrible, beautiful, broken theory of love. Because softness wasn't safe. Because she'd hidden her heart so long she couldn't find the door anymore even when she wanted to. And I watched these two women, who I knew loved each other now, who I knew had been bound together in the dark over 9 weeks of life and death, walk past each other in palace corridors like strangers, like enemies, the warm one hurt and the cold one suffering, and neither of them able to reach across because one didn't know and the other wouldn't tell. For months. Months. And it was the cruelest thing I ever watched, crueler than the dying nearly had been. This slow waste, this frost over a fire, two people freezing to death 3 feet from each other's warmth, and one of them holding the only match and refusing to strike it. I lasted maybe 4 months, and then I broke my word. It was an ordinary afternoon. That's the thing about the moments that matter, they almost never announce themselves. They come dressed as nothing. The princess was in one of the small sitting rooms, alone, and I was on the door. And she had a way sometimes of going still and far away, and I'd learned to read it. And that afternoon she was sitting by the window, gone still and far away, and there was something so sad in the line of her back that I don't know. Something in me that had been straining at its rope for 4 months just broke the rope. I stepped into the room. A guard does not step into the room. I stepped in and she looked up, surprised, and I stood there with my heart going and 20 years of discipline screaming at me to turn around and go back to the door, and I opened my mouth, and I said the thing I'd sworn never to say. I said, "While you were in the hospital." And then I couldn't stop. It came out of me in a rush, low, fast, the whole of it, all 9 weeks, the plain dark coat and the 3 in the morning and every night, every single night, and the talking through the door and the apologies and the please, 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 and the night the machines went wrong and the cold queen wept in the dark begging her not to go. I told her all of it. I broke every word I'd given. I betrayed the most direct order of my life. I stood there in that small sitting room, and I exposed the queen's most guarded secret to the one person she'd most wanted never to know it. And I did it because I could not stand to watch the waste one more day. Because some loyalties are bigger than the orders that contradict them. Or so I told myself. Or so I tell myself still. And Elira, she didn't speak. For a long moment she didn't make a sound, just looked at me, and I watched it reach her, watched it go down into her and rearrange everything, every memory of every cold moment, every slight she'd catalogued over the years, every careful brace, all of it tilting, recontextualizing, the cold queen of her whole understanding dissolving and a different woman rising up behind her. A woman who'd nearly killed herself with secret nightly vigils, and then hidden it out of some terrible idea about what love was allowed to be. And then she broke. She put her hands over her face, and she broke completely, the way you only break when something you'd built your whole understanding on falls down all at once. And she wept, not delicately, not a tear or two, but the deep, ugly, heaving kind, the kind that comes from years, and I stood there having caused it. The warm princess sobbing into her hands because the guard had told her she'd been loved all along by the woman she'd believed despised her, and she'd wasted years on the frost. And there was no getting those years back. You never get them back. That's the part you cry hardest about, not the wound but the waste. I didn't go to her, you don't. I just stood there, the cause and the witness both, until she'd cried herself quiet, and then she took her hands from her face and she looked at me, ruined and wet and somehow lighter, and she didn't thank me. There was no thanking. What was there to thank? I just handed her a grief and a gift so tangled together you couldn't pull them apart, but she nodded. The way you nod when something's been set right that can never quite be set right. And I went back to the door. I'll tell you the little of what came after, and then I'll stop, because the rest is theirs. Elira went to the queen. I don't know what was said. I wasn't on that door, thank God. Some moments shouldn't have a guard in them. But the frost broke. Not into some sudden warmth. Nothing so simple. These were not simple women, and 20 years of ice doesn't melt in an afternoon. But it broke. I'd see them after sometimes, sitting together, the two of them, not talking much, just sitting in the same room, which doesn't sound like much, but if you'd watched the years of careful distance, you'd know it was everything. It was a miracle. It was two people who'd been freezing 3 feet apart finally moving close enough to share what heat they had. The queen knew someone had told. Of course she did. There was that quiet inquiry, the careful questions, the household trying to work out how the princess had come to know. And I stood in front of it and I lied as smooth as still water, and they never found me. And the queen looked at me, once in a corridor in the middle of all that, looked at me with that closed face that I now knew was a door with a whole weeping world behind it. And she held my eye a moment longer than she ever had, and I couldn't read it. I still can't, whether it was fury or grief or thanks, the thanks she could never say to anyone for anything. The thanks for the thing I'd done that she'd ordered me never to do, and that had given her back something she'd been too frightened to reach for herself. I never knew, she never said. She went to her grave never having said one word to me about it, and I'll go to mine the same, the two of us carrying it, the secret and the breaking of the secret between us, unspoken forever. So that's my confession. I betrayed a queen's trust. I broke the most solemn word I ever gave. I exposed the most private thing a guarded woman ever guarded, and I made a princess cry as hard as I've ever seen anyone cry. And it was the best thing I ever did in 50 years of service, and it was wrong, plainly wrong, a wrong thing, and both of those are true at once, and I've stopped trying to make them stop being true at once. Love which announces itself isn't love, she said. Maybe. She'd know better than me. She paid more for hers than I ever paid for anything. But I think I've come to think in the long years since, that love which never lets itself be known isn't quite love either. It's just suffering with the lights off. And sometimes the only mercy is for someone to come into the room and turn the lights on, even if it's not their place, even if they were told not to, even if it makes everyone in the room weep. I turned the lights on, that's what I did. I'm not sorry, that's the part I can't make peace with. I'm not sorry at all.